welcome to a brand new show, Daily to Dynasty. I am your host, Craig Gorbunoff, joined alongside by John Hazelet and Rich Wilhelm. This is a brand new, exciting show that we're very excited to be presenting to you this evening. Some of you guys might be familiar with us. We previously were the hosts on the Code Green radio show that was formerly on SB Nation Radio and ESPN Radio, as well as Yahoo Sports Radio back in the day. After a few months off, we decided we wanted to get back into the podcasting game, and that was basically the birth of this show here, Daily to Dynasty. It is a fantasy football sports betting focused podcast where every week we're going to discuss different fantasy football, either lineups or draft strategy positions, and really focusing in on how to make yourself the champ. And I know Rich is going to hold up his belt in a second. Make yourself the champ in your local fantasy league, as well as for all you daily fantasy players. John is a super established daily fantasy rock star, cashing tickets, winning bets, left and right. This guy's the man you want to listen to if you want to make your money on your FanDuels, your DraftKings, or daily fantasy service of choice. So we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. We're going to start things off by talking about our top 10 fantasy football players for this season, as well as our top 5 sleepers. We'll talk about some rookies to look out for and who our Rookie of the Year picks will be. We'll start talking about some daily football strategy, or daily fantasy strategy, with the concept around stacks, why they're valuable, why they're good, and how they can kind of make or break your lineups. We'll talk about some prop bets, and of course, the elusive Super Bowl. If there is even an NFL season this season, we'll find out. But first, let me check in for my co-host. I've been talking for about a minute and a half straight. Rich, how is everything doing on your end? How are you holding up in this pandemic lifestyle? And what's been new with you since we've gone off the air?
I mean, living the dream one day at a time. Obviously, with the pandemic, working from home. But I mean, never forgetting about fantasy football and NFL news, following it every day. So, I'm hoping and praying that football comes back. I know any sports coming back into the home is a positive thing. If it's the NBA, if it's MLB, even horse racing. It's definitely a good thing to have amidst the coronavirus. So, I'm doing well.
Well, we're happy to hear that. Always fun to hear from you and talk football with you. And John, same question to you. How are you holding up? What's been new with you? I know you're very involved in horse racing. It's been a very active sport during this shutdown, and probably the best football bettor I know. So what's the latest with you?
Well, like everybody else, I'm in a sports coma here, a non-sports coma rather. Everything's good. Everyone's happy and healthy. Work is going great, but I definitely miss my sports for sure.
As we all do, which is, I think a big reason why we were all so excited to start up this show as well. Talk some sports, talk some football, and, everything is hopefully gearing up to start launching up in the fall. So we're looking forward to a potential NFL season here. Make sure you follow us all on Twitter. You can follow me at cgorbs94. You can follow John at John with an H, John, Hazelet 475, or Rich at Coda522. And guys, let's jump right into it here. And I think we'll notice a lot of similarities, but let's take a look at our top 10 fantasy football standings. And we were all in agreement here with our number one player, Christian McCaffrey. And Rich, I'll hand it to you first. What do you think is going to make Christian McCaffrey such a powerhouse in this coming NFL season?
I mean, it's hard not to say everything. If I could build a team, it would be around Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he is everything on the field you want. He is the bell cow running back. He is one of the best PPR running backs in the league. He can get anyone out of a jam at any time. I think he's going to be perfect for Teddy Bridgewater. I think, with Matt Rule being there, I think it's just going to be a match made in heaven. I think they're going to use him even better this year. They're going to keep him fresh, but I mean, the amount of points that he put up last year was insane. He puts up quarterback numbers in most leagues, and I want to preface, if we're talking strictly like drafting your fantasy football team, if you don't take Christian McCaffrey at number one, you're doing it wrong. Although Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson might score more points than him in daily fantasy, number one is clear cut. And I think it's a huge drop off from number two. He's the do everything back that any team would dream to have.
I 100% agree. I've been hot on the Christian McCaffrey bandwagon since he was drafted. I think he can do it all. He's very quick on his feet, lateral movement, catches the ball great, which makes him a huge weapon, especially in PPR leagues. And I just think he's a monster. We were all in agreement again on the number 2 pick here of Saquon Barkley. And John, I'll pass it to you. What is it about Saquon Barkley that is just why do fantasy owners have to have him on their squad?
Well, he's probably not probably he's one of the top 3 running backs in the game, and I think he's going to see a lot of carries this year, especially in rookie head coach is going to have to lean on him a little bit. Second year quarterback, trying to get a feel for him, and Saquon, like McCaffrey, but not on the same level, is going to be a dual threat. So he's going to get you some catches out of the backfield, and obviously the guy can run he can run the rock.
And he's just so elusive, and really, I think that he's just starting to scratch the surface on what he can do. The Giants were lacking talent around him. They're starting to kind of put together a program there, and I think he's just going to continue to get better and better over the next couple of seasons. Now, our number 3 pick, we have some variation here, but the consensus pick was Ezekiel Elliott. So let's start with him. And John, I'll pass it back to you about Ezekiel Elliott. Why is he your number 3 pick?
He's my number 3 guy, and he could very easily be my number 2 guy. I'll say that. I struggled a little bit with where to place him. I see a monster year coming for the Cowboys. I just think it's all lined up for that. Mike McCarthy there, a new offense. Dak just signed his tender or is about to sign his tender. And I think this is a stacked offense. And it's going to start and it's going to run straight through Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think there's any question. As long as this guy stays healthy, I think he's going to be a top 2 or 3 running back in fantasy. I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Zeke fan myself. I think he's an incredibly talented runner. I have him very close to this spot. In my number 3 spot, I have Derrick Henry, who I was just so impressed with last year. I think he's really the only true every down back in the NFL right now. He doesn't come off the field. He does everything, and he just runs the ball right down your throat. Rich had Henry listed a little later on at 5. But interestingly enough, John, Derrick Henry was not in your top 10. So, Rich, I want to just get your opinion on Henry, and then maybe we can just have a discussion on him as a player in general.
Well, I mean, I really think it's a battle between Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry for 3, 4, and 5. I think the drop-off after 2 is bigger than what some people think. I think with Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, they are stacked at wide receiver as well. Kamara, the Saints, offense is always with Breeze, he can do it all through the air as well. Henry, it's kind of a wild card. Tannehill, he has a year under his belt, so he's feeling more comfortable. AJ is trying to be that number 1 wide receiver for Tennessee. I think at the end of the day, any of these players could be number 3. I just think if the Titans are smarter, they're going to keep him a little fresher. I think Derrick Henry, he did a lot, and obviously, fantasy football owners loved him for that. But, the Titans are a team that are built from the bottom to the top, and I think it would be smart to lessen his carries slightly just to keep him fresh later in the year. That's why I have him at 5. But, I mean, he could be number 3 at the end of the day.
Yeah, I just think he's a fascinating player, and I think he takes a lot of carries. I think he's the guy they're going to trust when they're down in the red zone. And additionally, Tannehill isn't the strongest quarterback in the NFL, and we'll talk about the Titans quarterback situation a little bit later on in the show. But I think you're going to see Henry be the main person. And John, I guess I'm curious to hear from you, and I think I know part of the reasoning here. But what left Derrick Henry out of your top 10?
Well, I'll tell you this. It was very hard not to have him in the top 10. Just the way he was used last year, he absolute beast. Don't get me wrong. He carried that team. You watch him in the playoffs. He put everything on his back. Defenses in the NFL tend to figure that out after a while. And I think people have had a long time to study it. And I think I think people are going to be a little bit more willing to tackle him this year. And my question is, can he stay healthy for 16 games? And it just, just the way he carried the ball last year tells me there could be an injury lingering here somewhere. Just a feeling. That's why I put him out of my top 10.
And I've lost to John in fantasy football more times than I can count, so he probably knows what he's talking about here. Let's just kind of round out our top fives here. I'll just kind of read them off. Rich, you had McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Kamara, and Henry. We've talked about all of them, maybe Kamara a little bit less so, but I don't think the world needs to know more about Alvin Kamara. He's just an absolute beast. I had McCaffrey, Barkley, Henry, Elliott, and Dalvin Cook, who is John's number 4 running back from Minnesota. And John, your top 5 was McCaffrey, Barkley, Elliott, Cook, and Michael Thomas. So the first wide receiver mentioned in our fantasy football top 10 so far. And I think this is just part of an interesting discussion in that while the NFL is such a passing lead now, when it comes to the game of fantasy, the running back is still the most valued position. And, I find it interesting that, John had a wide receiver in his top 5. Rich and I didn't. And it's just kind of goes to show, I think, some differences in the fantasy game to the actual game of football. Rich, what is your kind of reasoning in keeping a wide receiver out of your top 5? And granted, we're talking about all the first round here, but I think teams are made or broken by this first round pick. So it is very important to set your board right.
Well, I mean, my reasoning is real life experience. I took Michael Thomas, I think it was 5th overall last year, because I wanted to make a big splash at wide receiver. Obviously, PPR league, he catches everything. But, I mean, you're right. When it comes to, fantasy football, for me at least, I'm going to take a running back with that first overall pick. I do think that Drew Brees is going to have his farewell tour this year and just absolutely light it up, no matter if there's any turmoil off the field between the guys. I think, they're going to do the best job they can. But, I mean, it's just because last year it didn't bite me in the butt. But, I mean, I had to do some scrambling later in the year with my roster because I didn't take running back in the top 5. That's my reasoning.
And, John, what's your logic in having Michael Thomas crack the top 5?
Touches. The guy's going to get 150 touches a year at the wide receiver position. I think that's a big thing, especially in this day and age. And in full disclosure, I'm a big PPR guy. I don't play a lot of standard. So for me, I want a guy up there that's going to get a lot of catches. And to me, Michael Thomas, and I'm sure we'll talk about who I have number 6 later, but I think Michael Thomas is the number 1 receiver in the game.
And funny enough, I don't have Michael Thomas in my top 10 because of this fallout with Drew Brees. I think the Saints offense could be very different from what we've seen over the last couple of seasons because of this kind of off-season issues in the Saints locker room. So, I think you see a lot of variance in opinions here, but you got to take it all with a grain of salt. Do your own handicapping, right? Do your own homework and figure out what works best for you. Just kind of going into the back half of our top 5s here. I'll let Rich just kind of take us through your 6 through 10, and then John, you'll do the same, and then we'll just kind of have a discussion on some of the differences.
I mean, number 6, I have Michael Thomas. I mean, despite my plan last year not working out as well as it could have been, like John said, he's going to catch everything that's thrown at him. At the end of the day in the NFL, if you don't do your job, you're not going to get paid. So I understand that some people air out their stuff on social media and Twitter and everything else like that. But, what they do on the field is their job. So I think Michael Thomas, I don't think he's going to have that much of a down season. He could actually have a better season than he did last year just because Brees is going to absolutely light it up. He's going to go out with a bang. Number 7, I have DeAndre Hopkins. It's the same thing. He has the perfect opportunity in Arizona. I think the Texans were crazy to trade him. Kyler Murray, he showed last year that he was the right pick. And, everything about that offense I love. The wide receiver, Kenyon Drake, doing everything he can. So for me, DeAndre Hopkins at 7 is a no-brainer. He's right below Michael Thomas. Number 8 is Dalvin Cook, and the only reason he's slightly lower is because he wants to try to push the hands of Minnesota with his sitting out talk and everything else like that. With a new CBA, if you sit out a day, you can lose a year of eligibility. So it's all talk at the end of the day, but, he dropped a little bit just because of that. He is a bell cow running back. With Diggs not being in Minnesota, he could, benefit from that, obviously. So he's at 8. Number 9 is Nick Chubb. The only reason he's not higher is because he shares the ball. I think that him and Hunt are going to be a two-man wrecking crew. I love Nick Chubb. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan. I think he can do it all. He probably will be higher than 9 at the end of the year. But just because it's a two-person committee, that's the only reason he's number 9 for me right now. And number 10 is Devonta Adams. He had a little bit of a down year last year, which is why he's number 10 for me. He didn't crack 1,000 yards last year, which is surprising. But I think he's going to come back with a vengeance this year with Rodgers. The Packers' defense is getting better. They're forcing more turnovers. That's going to give him more opportunities to get targets from Aaron Rodgers because the offense is going to have the ball a lot more. I think the Packers are going to be a better team overall this year. And Devonta Adams is going to be a big part of that.
I think you hit the nail right on the head with these names here, Rich. These are the guys we're going to see go in the first round. John has a couple of different names on this list. We're all kind of similar. But John, why don't you take us through the back half of your top 10 here and maybe just go into a little bit of detail on some of the different players that are listed.
Sure. My number 6 is DeAndre Hopkins. Again, I told you 5 was Michael Thomas because he's the best wide receiver in football. I think DeAndre is 1A. And like Rich said, I love him in this offense. I can't imagine a guy getting 150 to 200 catches, but if that's possible, it could be DeAndre Hopkins this year in that offense. My number 7 is Miles Sanders. It's not going to make a lot of people's top 10, but he came on very strong towards the end of the year. I think the Eagles are going to do a lot to try to keep Wentz healthy all year. And again, I love the fact that he could be a little bit of a dual threat. My number 8 is Tyreek Hill. He's Pat Mahomes' number 1 guy. It's his go-to guy, and he's a threat to score every time he touches the ball. And to me, he definitely has to make my top 10. Number 9 is a guy that's going to surprise some people, Joe Mixon. Again, I like what I saw for him last year. I think his second year in the offense, again, with a rookie quarterback. And this is probably the only time I've ever said this in the history of my fantasy football career. But I like what the Bengals did in the draft. I think they've really did a nice job surrounding their team with good players. So I think Mixon's definitely going to see the benefit of that. And my number 10 is a guy who could be anywhere from 3 to 10, really, is Alvin Kamara. The only reason for me I dropped him just a touch is because there's so many weapons in that offense. And I think that's by design. I think you saw a little bit last year where they tried to limit him a little bit to keep him fresh. So that's why I just dropped him a couple spots there.
Yeah, and I like your pick here of Miles Sanders and Joe Mixon. I have Mixon in the back half of my top 10 as well. I think, if Joe Burrow is what he's supposed to be, it's going to open up a lot of lanes in the running game for sure, and make that offense very dynamic. The back half of my top 10, it's pretty similar with one difference, and this is where I think we can open up the conversation a bit. I have Alvin Kamara at 6 for all the reasons listed above, DeAndre Hopkins at 7, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon. But at number 10, I have Lamar Jackson. I think that this doesn't happen often in the NFL, and really the only time that I can think of was nearly a decade ago. Aaron Rodgers was considered this good in fantasy football as well, where he was just scoring so many points. I think if you're not getting Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes in your first round, there's going to be a pretty significant drop-off. I just think they're at such a different level when it comes to fantasy production at quarterback that you're going to have to get one of them, before round 1 is over. And Lamar Jackson is just my quarterback of preference because of it. It's the extra factor with rushing the football. Not that Mahomes doesn't do that, but Lamar Jackson just does it so well. I think his throwing game's only going to get better, right? I think he's only going to progress even further as a quarterback. I could be completely wrong, and it could be a down year for the Ravens, but I just don't see that happening. I think he has to be in the first round and a top 10 fantasy football player in my opinion, and all you guys know, and all you guys meaning John and Rich, and any former listeners who may have found their way over to this show, is I am not a quarterback in the first round guy. I always say you can wait till round 6 to get a quarterback, round 8 to get a quarterback, because guys like Ben Roethlisberger are always there. Guys, like Phillip Rivers were always there. You could even get Tom Brady real late, in a lot of leagues. But I just think Lamar Jackson is going to be a different kind of fantasy football quarterback this season. John, what are your opinions on taking Lamar Jackson this high in a fantasy draft?
Yeah, I could definitely make the case for it for all the reasons you said, Craig. Listen, the guy had an absolutely ridiculous year last year, which I don't think many people could predict. I certainly did not. I was wrong on Lamar Jackson from the get-go. I thought he should not have been a quarterback coming out, and I couldn't have been more wrong. He definitely proved everybody wrong last year. But at the same time, when I talk about Henry, I'm going to say a little bit about Jackson. NFL defenses have had a year to figure him out. Let's see if they have. But yeah, I definitely see him being one of the top players, and it doesn't surprise me to have him in the top 10.
And Rich, we're like-minded in our quarterback approach normally when it comes to fantasy football. But would you consider taking Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson with that 10th overall pick?
I don't think I would take them in the first. I'm doing mock drafts, because what else are you going to do with the quarantine right now? And Patrick Mahomes is going, second or third round, and Lamar Jackson is going a little bit behind him. For me, I like when people take quarterbacks in the first round because I know I'm going to get a premier player. If it's a running back or a wide receiver or coming back on the tail end, I love when people take quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes is a difference maker. Like I said in the beginning of the show, if you're talking daily fantasy, he should be in all your lineups. And Lamar Jackson, he won me my Dynasty League last year. Having him and McCaffrey somehow on the same team, most weeks that's all I needed. So
are you flashing the hardware right now?
I mean, I can do it again. This is the Dynasty League right here. But it's definitely nice to have premier players on your team. But I mean, the first round for me, a quarterback, the only one I would even go after remotely would be Mahomes, and it would have to be a bigger league. Maybe at 12 or 13 if you're coming back. If you're at 12 and you're drafting at 12, you get like Mahomes and a second-tier running back, I think that's money in the bank. That's what I would do. But if I'm drafting, let's say in the top 6, I wouldn't even consider it at this point.
Yeah, and I guess I approached it with the mindset, right? Like it's a smaller league, maybe it's a 10-team league, right? And you're serpentining. If you have that last pick, I need my quarterback, right? And then I can get my running back, right after. So that's where I came at this from. But guys, we want to hear from you. Please tweet at us at cgorbs94, at Coda522, at John Hazelet. Oh, wow, I'm forgetting those last 3 numbers, John. 457?
475.
475, so close. John Hazelet, 475, John with an H. Who is your fantasy top 10 this coming season? We'd love to hear from you. But guys, we're going to move on to a little bit later on in the draft now. We're going to talk about our sleepers. These are guys that, I think you can get maybe from round 7 onward who are going to potentially have a good impact on your team. When you get to that point in the draft, you start to really notice who's done their homework and who is just taking the best available. This was interesting when I was looking over our list because we didn't have very much. We didn't have a lot of the same names across the boards, which I think just goes to show, the differences of opinion. And I think there's going to be a lot of value in the NFL this season. So, John, let's start with you and just take us through your top 5 sleepers this season.
Sure. The first guy I threw out there, and he's debatable whether he's a sleeper or not, but he's a rookie, CeeDee Lamb. I love the way where he landed with the Cowboys. You're going to see a theme with me with the Cowboys in this show. I think he's a good player. I think he's going to be drafted towards the top of the rookies, but it should still be, like you said, Craig, about middle rounds. And I think he's going to play a big role in that offense early on. My next guy is more of I think he makes an impact towards the second half of the season, more so than the first half of the season. But it's going to be Keyshawn Vaughn, running back from the Bucs. He's, again, I think I said this word 4 or 5 times. He's a dual threat. Tom Brady likes a dual threat. And I think this guy's going to be able to put some points on the board for you So, look for him towards the later end of your drafts and, grab him and stash him. My next guy is a little bit of a homer pick because I'm a Jet fan, but Brashard Perryman. I think he's gonna. The last half of last year again. Did a great job with Tampa Bay, and I think he's bred to be a wide receiver here. His father was also a wide receiver, was also a late bloomer in his career. So I think Perriman is kind of in a good spot with the Jets, and I think he's going to fill a big role for them. The next guy I debated, I was only going to give one or two of these guys. I gave you Noah Fant instead of T.J. Hawkinson, but they kind of go hand in hand. Second-year tight end, again, Fant in that offense with the young quarterback. And, Denver did a nice job putting some pieces around their quarterback. And I think Fant's going to play a big role there. And my last guy, he's a guy you've heard of, maybe not such a sleeper, but Sony Michel. I think it's a new breed of Patriot this year. They're going to run the rock a lot, and this guy's going to be their feature guy. And I think people will notice that. I think he might even have a tendency to be overdrafted a little bit. But those are my five that I think people aren't quite thinking about that could have a pretty good impact for them.
Yeah, and I love the Sony Michel mention here as well. You're right; it's a new breed of Patriot, and I still think of them as the same team. I keep assuming that Tom Brady's under center. That it hasn't hit me yet that this is a new era of the NFL. But you're right; they're going to run the rock. They're going to run it hard. They have a lot of backs, but I think Sony Michel is the lead one. And of course, being the Jets fan myself as well. We're all Jets fans on this podcast. I don't know if I made that clear at the front. But Brashard Perriman, I'm hoping for a good year with Mr. Darnold at quarterback. Rich, now you have a completely different top five sleepers, which I just think is fascinating that all of us had a completely different list of people. So why don't you take us through your list?
All right. So my first sleeper, I have Hayden Hurst. For me, Hayden Hurst is going to be the new Austin Hooper. I think he's in a perfect situation in Atlanta, and he's ranked at 94. So last year in fantasy, tight ends were at a minimum. But if you have a good tight end, you don't have to worry about it. If you picked up like a Mark Andrews last year, he could have won your league for you. So for me, 94 is good value for a possible starting tight end in your lineup. Next, I have Darius Slayton. New York Giants wide receiver. He's ranked at 98. He lit it up last year. If you watch the Giants versus the Jets game, he destroyed the Jets. I mean, so did Golden Tate. But I think the connection between him and Daniel Jones is great. He could be the number one wide receiver in that offense over time. I think he has more of a connection than Golden Tate does with Daniel Jones. Next, I have Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He outplayed Juju Smith-Schuster last year, and he showed that he can play with multiple quarterbacks. If it was Mason Rudolph, Duck Hodges, he's going to have Big Ben this year, and it's going to be a lot better for him. I think Juju's going to have a better year too, but Deontay Johnson probably will end up being that guy because I don't think the Steelers are going to re-sign Juju next year. Next, I have Justin Jefferson. Going into the drafts, Justin Jefferson was my guy. He did everything at LSU. He landed in the perfect situation in Minnesota because he's going to be the new Stephon Diggs. It's going to be Thielen. It's going to be Justin Jefferson. He's going to pick up all those targets. He's going to be rookie heaven, especially for people playing Dynasty. And I know John and I play in the same league, so sorry, John, you're probably going to draft him before me. I just showed my hand, but, got to do it for the show. He is ranked at 153. Deontay Johnson is ranked 106, by the way. My next guy, it kind of goes hand in hand with what John said about Noah Fant. Drew Lock. He has all the weapons. I mean, you got Cortland Sutton, you got Jerry Jeudy, you got KJ Hamler, Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, Noah Fant. I mean, if he doesn't succeed, something went wrong. He has all the tools. He has the coaching. He's going to be a quarterback that you should stash because he might end up starting. If he's available in your Dynasty League, you need to take him because he's going to be someone that you can keep on your roster for many years to come. So those are my five sleepers.
And Rich, a few years ago we played in a fantasy league that had two starting quarterbacks, and I don't know exactly how common that is for everybody, but a guy like Drew Lock, I think is somebody you could pick up later, gives you a ton of value. I was always scrambling to find a good second quarterback, to start, and having a guy like Lock who you can draft late, bolster the rest of your team. I think that's going to be a ton of value late in people's drafts, and especially in dynasty leagues. My sleepers, I think there's some familiar names, there's some new names here. But my first sleeper is a name that used to be, the premier guy in fantasy football, and that's Todd Gurley. He's in a new situation in Atlanta. He was the most talented running back in football for a time. Something happened in LA. I don't know what it was. I don't know if we'll ever know what it was, but he's in a fresh new situation. And I was looking at some projections earlier. He was going late, like round 6, round 7 for a running back that used to be the number 1 overall pick. I think he's worth a flyer. If he's 3/4 of the player he was at his prime, you're going to get a ton of value there. And, I think there's a huge drop off in the running back position normally from round 1 to round 2 to round 3. So if Todd Gurley can be 3/4 of the player he used to be, and you can get him in round 6, round 7, I think that's going to be a home run. And if it's a bust, you know what? It's a bust. But that's why you listened to us earlier and you took running backs early, right? My number 2 sleeper is going to be Eric Ebron. This is a player I've been waiting to break out for so long, and I just think he's had really incredibly bad luck. He started his career with Detroit, didn't quite pan out the right way, but Detroit's a very up and down team. He goes to Indianapolis. Andrew Luck gets hurt. There's some talent around him, but not a lot. And he had some pretty productive games. He's going to find himself in Pittsburgh now. He's going to have the best quarterback he's gotten to play with in Ben Roethlisberger. He's not the only weapon, right? There's some talent around him, and I think he'd be able to do some damage over the middle. I know he's not the only tight end with McDonald there as well, but I think Ebron could make himself the number 1 option. My third sleeper is going to be Denzel Mims, the rookie wide receiver with the New York Jets. A little bit more of a dynasty play here, but I think he can be an impact player, in his first season as well. He has an opportunity to become like Darnold's top option, right? And they can grow up together and grow together. So I think there's some real good opportunity there. He's an interesting player that you're definitely going to be able to get late. A lot of times in fantasy, people stay away from New York Jets. So I think he's an intriguing option. Number 4, and Rich, I'm surprised he wasn't on your list. Andy Isabella, he's a wide receiver for the Cardinals, was drafted. Rich was all over him, last year going into the draft. He thought he was going to be such a steal. It's similar reasons to Mims with Arizona. Young quarterback, he has a chance to become the go-to guy. He's playing alongside DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to be a stud. He's going to take, all the coverages away from the other wide receivers. And, I just see these like little bootleg routes, right, with Isabella underneath, Murray just dropping little dump offs to him while Hopkins is taking all the coverage over the top. I just think he's going to be a PPR machine. I know Christian Kirk is there as well. There's some other weapons, but I think this guy has the potential to be pretty special. And John mentioned this guy earlier, but TJ Hawkinson, young tight end, didn't have the best rookie season, but has a chance to rebound, and I think could be a pretty good weapon, for Matthew Stafford and the Detroit Lions. So that's our top 5 sleepers, 15 different sleepers, I think all of which had a lot of value. I commented on all your guys' top 5s. Did anyone have any thoughts about these sleepers before we move on?
I mean, I love Andy Isabella. There's just so many mouths to feed in Arizona. I wish he could be my sleeper, but I think he's going to have to go undrafted this year, and I might have to stash him, later in the year. But, I still love Andy Isabella.
Andy Isabella all day, every day. So, guys, let's start talking about our Rookie of the Year candidates. We've talked about a lot of young players. We mentioned a lot of different young guys, a lot of rookies. But, John, I'll hand it to you first because I know I believe you had 2 players listed here, unless I'm misreading our doc here. But tell me, who are your Rookie of the Year candidates?
Yeah, there's 2 that stand out to me. And again, I mentioned this guy before, CeCe Lamb. I just think he's going to have a lot of opportunity in that offense. I know that's a stacked offense, but I think he can do a lot from the position he's going to be playing. And my other guy is I'm going to butcher his last name, Brandon Ayuk from the Niners. I think he's like a Debo Jr. over there. With Debo being hurt, I think he's got to step up a little bit. And I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity, especially in that offense. So those are the two guys I kind of circle and say I think these guys could both be rookies of the year.
I think what's interesting, with CeeDee Lamb at the wide receiver position, you don't often see these guys get that kind of recognition, right? With the award. So I think that would be really cool to see. Rich, you and I had the same prospect for our rookie of the year, but you're just so eloquent at describing your football analysis. So tell me why Joe Burrow is the rookie of the year.
Well, I mean, most of the time it's going to be that quarterback. If you want to save money, you're not going to win a lot of money. But, Joe Burrow, he's in the perfect situation. He's going to start day one. I really think it's going to come down to him and Tua, but Tua has to win the job in order to be in the running. Ryan Fitzmagic, he's not going to hand the job over. I think they're going to open the season with Fitzpatrick being the guy, and then maybe when Miami starts losing games, Tua comes in. By that time, I don't think it's going to be enough to overtake Burrow. But Burrow, he has a lot of talent around him. AJ Green's going to be coming back. You got Tyler Boyd, you got John's boy and Joe Mixon. I don't think the coaching is great, but I think Joe Burrow is a stud. You looked at his numbers last year at LSU. He's a champion. He has champion bloodline. He knows how to play in a pro-style offense. He took on the best talent there was to offer in college football, and he did it handily. So I think it's going to be Joe Burrow, and I think it's not going to be close for anyone else.
Yeah, I just think he's really talented. I think he's really special. He had all the qualities that you want in a quarterback. He looked really, really poised, at LSU, and I just hope that can translate to the NFL. Because I think he's going to be part of this young crop of quarterbacks, that next generation in the NFL. So that's pretty much all of our standard fantasy football discussion. And again, reach out to us on Twitter. Because we want to hear from you, we want to hear your opinions and continue the conversation. But we're going to go from that dynasty now to the daily. And daily fantasy, has become, I think, just a huge sensation over the last couple of years. People have found this to be incredibly fun. You're making fresh lineups every single week. You have the whole NFL at your disposal to make the ultimate lineup. And John, you have really, to me at least, been the guru with this. I don't know anyone who knows this game like you do. So why don't you, I think, give our listeners a little bit of your background with the game, because you have a lot of success playing it. And then, take us through, we talked about, we're going to go through our top 5 stacks, but just talk about stacks in general, what they are and why they're valuable.
Yeah, my background, as you guys both know, a few years ago, I hit for 40 grand on FanDuel. And it was a tremendous lineup. FanDuel was a little bit different then. They played a little bit different. You were allowed to do a Sunday, Monday lineup for the big prize. And I had an Eagles stack that just killed it. And including their defense scoring 45 points. And I absolutely blew away the competition. The closest guy to me, I think, was 15 points below me. And in DFS, 15 points is like 100. So stacks, I'm a fan of stacks. They are a risk-reward situation, though. You're either going to, if you have the right stack with a couple other decent players, you're going to score a lot of points, and chances are you're going to finish in the money. And if you don't stack correctly, or the risk with the stack is if you put two or three guys from the same team and one of them has a lousy game, your stack didn't pay off. If all three of them have a lousy game, you probably didn't score many points. So there's always that risk reward. I'm a believer in them. I do many lineups every week, and most of mine are going to have a stack or two of some sort. Sometimes I'll do 2 stacks in a lineup. Most of the time, it's just one, though.
And when you're talking about daily fantasy in general, for anyone who hasn't played, right, you're a hardcore fantasy football player, you haven't gotten around to the daily fantasy lifestyle, you have a budget, right, every week. Each lineup can cost X amount of dollars. Each player is given a numeric value, right? And you want to do your best to just create the best lineup while staying within the budget. And John, we've talked about this before, but this is a brand new show, so I'll ask you to reiterate. When it comes to that budgeting process, you have always said, right, why save the money, right? Just go out and spend it and make the best lineup possible.
Yeah, yes and no. I'm not a slave to it. There's plenty of times where I leave a lot of money on the table. Again, I try to get caught up in absolute matchup and and not exactly what the money is. Like, if you have $50,000 or $60,000 to work, 60,000 points to work with, and you're up at you're down to one player, and one player, you have 5,000 points left, and one player is 4,800, and one player is 5,000, or one player is 4,500, and one player is 5,000. That doesn't matter. I'm not going to pick the 5,000 guy because he costs more and I can fit him under my budget. I'm going with the best matchup. There's times, and Rich can tell you because I've shared some lineups with him, where I've left $6,000 or $7,000 on my budget, outside of the budget. So again, I'm not a slave to it, but if you use it correctly and you study it a little bit, and you can definitely use it all wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's truly a game where you have to just pay such close attention to the matchups, their injuries, right? Who's healthy and on each side, because all those little things, they add up, right? If a corner has a tweaked calf, he's not going to be able to cover a wide receiver so great.
Yeah, the matchups are really important, and another key to me is the injury report. I want to know what that injury report is right up until game time. Sometimes your best value is a backup quarterback or a backup running back, where I could pick them up for pennies on the dollar, what a normal starter would be, and they're just gonna blow it up for you. The perfect example of that is this. It was actually 2 weeks after I won the 40 grand. If you recall, a few years back, Ryan Fitzpatrick was a Texan and he threw 6 touchdown passes. He was on one of my rosters because he was a cheap play, and he was a last minute start, and it was boom, and the guy threw 6 touchdowns. There's a lot of value in being able to seek that out. It all depends on, like I said, you got to watch the injury report, and you really got to know the offense of who you're playing. Sometimes a number 1 running back to a number 2 running back isn't that much of a difference. So again, I'll take the 2 and save a few $1,000s towards my cap and use that money in a different spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a ton of sense. So with all that being said, right, with matchup being super important in this game, we still went ahead and created top 5 stacks for 2020. And these are, kind of just ballparks, right? Keep an eye on these matchups and or these players, what their matchups look like. And I think this is kind of a good basis to start your strategy for FanDuel. And Rich, we just let John do a lot of talking. So why don't you kick this off and take us through your top 5 stacks?
All right. So I have variations for the stacks because obviously you want different positions for, each week. So my first stack is called the cheaper Panther stack. This does include Christian McCaffrey, which obviously he's going to be expensive every single week. But I also have Teddy Bridgewater in here, and I have DJ Moore. DJ Moore, definitely an undervalued player. He is someone who can be a number 1 on most teams. I don't care that Robbie Anderson is there. I think DJ Moore might have even a better year than he did last year with Teddy Bridgewater. He's out to prove something. So he's going to absolutely tear it up with Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore. It should be on the cheaper side, just simply because of Teddy Bridgewater and DJ Moore. Next stack is the complete opposite of that. If you can find players to fill your roster, you want to put this stack in every single week because they all are going to get numbers every single week. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill. And that's what I'm going to call the expensive KC stack because that's going to be most of your money. That's when you're going to put value plays into your lineup. And if, you can't fit it, I think McCole Hardman can be, a nice substitute for Tyreek Hill because he showed last year that he can be that guy. He can be that number 2. I think he's a better prospect than Sammy Watkins in that offense. Technically number 2 would be Travis Kelce But if we're talking wide receivers, definitely McCole Hardman if you can't fit Tyreek Hill in there. My third stack, I'm calling the Be More Charm City stack, which is Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, and Mark Andrews. Lamar Jackson, he's going to do it on the ground. He's going to do it through the air. Mark Ingram, he obviously there's a lot of running backs in Baltimore. There's even more so now. You can even count Lamar Jackson as, a dual threat with the running back position as well. But Mark Ingram's going to get the ball down by the goal line, I think. He is the bulldozer. He's the guy that's just going to knock people over, and he's fast. Mark Andrews, everyone thought that Hayden Hurst was going to be the guy coming out. Mark Andrews took over that job, and he ran with it. He is, every week it seems like he's scoring a touchdown. My fourth stack is called the Chargers skill position stack, which doesn't include a quarterback. Austin Eckler, I'm so happy that he is the main guy now. I think, last year, even if Melvin Gordon, said, I want to be a Charger for life, and, I think he still would have got overtaken by Austin Eckler. He is a dual threat as well. He's like Christian McCaffrey light to me. I have Keenan Allen there. We're going to have to see what happens with that quarterback change. If Herbert's going to be the guy or Tyrod Taylor, but either way, Keenan Allen's going to catch the ball. And then Hunter Henry. You don't know if he's going to be there past this year. I think he's going to put everything on the line. He came back last year from a gruesome injury. I didn't think he was going to come back, and he finished the year off strong. So, the skill position in for the Chargers is definitely something to stack. And then my last stack is called the Buffalo Speed Stack. Josh Allen, similar to Lamar Jackson, but not on the same playing field. Dual threat, not so much dual threat. I mean, he's not the best at passing, but he's going to get yards on the ground. He's going to get those dump off passes. Where if you need a cheaper quarterback, he's someone who's going to fit into your lineup. Devin Singletary, the running back, showed that he can be the powerhouse running back that Buffalo needs. Frank Gore's not there anymore. I think Devin Singletary is going to get more touches. And then their new fancy toy in Stephon Diggs. When you think about speed, when you think about, the cross route, simple cross route, Stephon Diggs can take that to the house every single time. It's going to be, Josh Allen's best friend. It's going to increase Josh Allen's numbers, which is why you stack them together. So those are my 5 stacks. There's going to be stacks that I'm going to play, week in and week out, just based on the matchup. And then also something I want to throw in is, always look at the weather report too.
Yeah. The weather report too. It's a huge factor in this, right? If there's going to be a big old game in the slop, I don't know if I want to take Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill stack, right? Like they're not going to necessarily be slinging the ball for 5 touchdowns, and Tyreek's not necessarily going to have 150 through the air. I might be looking more at a Be More Charm City stack, right? Who are going to run the football a lot, do some option stuff. It might be a better opportunity. So definitely something to keep in mind. John, why don't you take us through your stacks for this coming season?
Yeah, my stacks. The first one's going to be, Rich had this one as well. Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey. I mean, I think Rich covered it pretty well. You're going to pay a lot of money for those 3, so you better have some lower end roster guys that you feel are going to do very well. And these guys you're going to pay for every week in, week out. And listen, they're expensive because they're good. Another thing to watch is a lot of people are going to be playing those 3 guys. Sometimes the hot guy, if 70% of the people are using them, maybe I'm not going to use them that week because I want to be a little bit different. My second one is going to be, I'll call it the Raven stack. It's Jackson, obviously. Guy I love, J.K. Dobbins, I think is one of the best picks in the draft, especially where they got him. And Marquise Brown, I think that's a tremendous little stack. Ravens are going to run the ball. There's no question about that. And Dobbins is a guy, again, I think, Ingram's going to be the goal line guy and what have you. But I think Dobbins is an absolute beast of a runner. And it's not going to be long before he's the lead back there. My third one is probably my favorite one early on. It's going to be Kyler Murray. It's going to be Drake, and it's going to be Hopkins. I think that offense has a lot of potential to put up a lot of points. And I think early on, that's going to be reasonably priced. Towards the middle to the end of the season, as these players progress, it's probably going to get a little bit more expensive. And my fourth, I was kind of debating. It's definitely going to be Watson and Cooks or Watson and Fuller. I love Watson and Fuller as a combo last year. You know, Fuller played that secondary role to Hopkins, and if that guy could stay on the field, he's an absolute beast as well. And my fifth one is so it's a little less known one. You could, especially early on, you're going to get this one dirt cheap. Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder. You know, FanDuel's PPR, most of these things are going to give you points for reception. And I think Crowder's a guy, especially this year, is going to have 5 or 6 catches a game. That's opportunity. And I think those two together, you're going to get relatively inexpensive. And then, you know, those are two good guys to have in your roster when you want to add a McCaffrey, or you want to add, one of the big guys. You want to add a Zeke or a Kamara. So those are the 5 that I have my eye on early on.
Yeah, and I think you have a lot of value here. And I think the thing that I want to point out in the major difference between the daily versus regular, right? You have Watson and Cooks or Watson and Fuller. Fuller has some injury issues, and he might be the better option for the first 4 weeks or so. And then, he might get hurt, and you can do Watson and Cooks, and you're going to get just as good a value. So, and you have that option, right, as a daily fantasy player. So just one of kind of the different nuances in the game. Long-term injury concern isn't necessarily something you have to worry about. So I had a couple of different stacks that I just want to throw out here as well. You guys hit on a good portion of them, but one of them that I wanted to bring up is Tom Brady and Mike Evans. Brady's new face, new place. You could even throw Gronk into that stack if you wanted to, and triple it up. I think Brady's just going to be flinging some touchdowns down south. Evans is a big guy, and when Brady has had top-tier receivers, they've been incredible, right? But he hasn't had top-tier receivers for most of his career, right? He had Gronk, he had Randy Moss, and when Randy Moss was in New England, right, he was a monster. But his wide receivers are normally the Julian Edelman types, the Chris Hogan types, good players in their own right, but not, bona fide studs at wide receiver. So I think that's something really interesting to keep an eye on. I think Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins are, again, really interesting as a duo. And I think could equal a lot of touchdowns. But you could also insert a Christian Kirk into that situation, who I think is a value play at wide receiver, but could get a lot of touches. And then I like the 49ers offense a lot last year. I think Garoppolo, Kittle, and Mostert, I never learned how to pronounce his last name, the running back. But I like the Niners a lot. I think they choked in the Super Bowl, but they're still a very good team. I think they'll be a very good team next year. So I'll just open it up before we move on to kind of our prop bet section here. But any closing thoughts on daily fantasy?
I mean, it's fun. You hit the nail on the head before when you said every week it's a new team. If your fantasy football team sucks and you're out of it, you could still win more money than you would have if you do fantasy, daily fantasy. So the NFL keeps it exciting, from week 1 until week 17. And if you do playoffs, obviously they have that too. So daily fantasy, can make the NFL great if your team in real life or if your fantasy team are garbage.
Yeah, and for me, don't forget to play a lot of lineups. You could overanalyze lineups from here till the cows come home, and it could be one player that makes a difference. A few years ago, it came down to 2 players for me. I picked the wrong one. If I'd have picked the other one, I would have won $125,000. The smart move would have been to put 2 lineups exactly the same with one of each of those players, and my winnings would have tripled. So don't be afraid to play multiple lineups if you have a feeling about a lineup.
Yeah, and that's a similar concept in betting, in horse racing, right? In your multi-race wagers, use different combinations, right? Use different horses. You want to protect yourself a little bit as long as you're not breaking the bet on your wager, or breaking the bank on your wager, excuse me. So definitely some good advice. Use different lineups, but if you have a really strong feeling, right, that's the one you're going to want to hammer home. So let's move into some prop bets, and this is just something fun, right? These are things like who's going to win the coin flip, for the Super Bowl. But just kind of some interesting topics of discussion. And obviously, with all that's going on in the world, Colin Kaepernick has been once again in the headlines, and the world is clamoring for his return to the NFL. I'm still not certain that this will happen, but I think, it's fun to discuss which team he might end up on. And I'll start off the conversation here. And I think there's really only 3 teams that make sense for him to join. I think in terms of him starting, the only team he could potentially start on is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I love Gardner Minshew. I think he's hysterical, but I don't know if he's an NFL quarterback. I think, Kaepernick can probably come in, and if he is 3/4 of the player that he was when he left, he's probably better than Gardner Minshew and can start for Jacksonville. As far as anywhere else, I think you're talking about him being a backup. A backup that could potentially play is a situation like the New York Giants. Daniel Jones had a very good season last year, but, young players sometimes crumble. So there's some situations in which I think you could see Kaepernick enter the game like that. Plus, I think he's a veteran backup. He's been around the game, right? He's played in a Super Bowl. He has a lot of knowledge that I think could be beneficial for Daniel Jones. And the last option is Seattle Seahawks. They've been interested in him before. I think Russell Wilson needs a quality backup, and I think it'd be a good reintroduction to the NFL for Colin Kaepernick. So those are my 3 teams to watch out for, and if I were interested in placing a prop bet, I'd put a little bit money on the 3 of them. Rich, what are your squads that Colin Kaepernick might end up on?
I named 4. The perfect place for him would be in New York as a Giant. I think, they have the biggest media in the country. He can push his platform and everything else while being, that Eli Manning, player to Daniel Jones. It's going to be hard to have a young player in there because everyone's going to be pushing for Colin Kaepernick to be the starter for obvious reasons. But I mean, there is not a lot of, depth in New York now with Eli retiring. I think it would be good for, Kaepernick to be there. Obviously he's going to be a little rusty. It's been a couple of years now. But I think it's a good situation for him to be in, to push his platform as well as being on a team where he could possibly start. I have the Seahawks. There was talk about him, possibly getting a tryout for them. And, it's a good situation for him to be in Seattle with Russell Wilson. I think that pair can coexist very well. Seattle's not going to push for Kaepernick to be the starter there because of Russell Wilson. And I think it's a quality backup if anything does happen to Russell. Number 3, I have the Jaguars as well. Nick Foles couldn't beat out Minshew. Could Kaepernick beat out Minshew? I don't know. I do like Gardner Minshew a lot. I think he's really good for that team. If he goes to Jacksonville, they are going to push for Kaepernick to be the starter in Jacksonville. And last, I have the Titans. You don't know about Ryan Tannehill. He could be a one-year wonder with that system. He could go back to what he was with the Dolphins, but that wasn't entirely his fault. Coaching that they had, now the Jets have that lovely coaching, but he could be that guy. Tannehill got paid, but Tannehill could go back to where he was. So Kaepernick, again, would probably be pushed forward by fans to start. But I mean, it's a good situation to have. If your starting quarterback goes down, Colin Kaepernick comes in. He was in a Super Bowl. He has a lot of experience, and he's a good backup to have. So those are my 4.
I only have 2, but all the teams you guys said, and for the reasons you said, make sense in a way, specifically Jacksonville. But the 2 for me, and I'll be frank, I don't think there's any. I don't think he's back this year. I don't think he's back at all. But if I had to pick 2, my first one would be the Baltimore Ravens. I think he's a perfect backup for Lamar. It's an offense he's very familiar with. It's basically the offense he ran to one is with the Niners in the Super Bowl, and I think that's a natural fit. The other one for me has to be the Texans for the same reason. It's a mobile quarterback. Watson's a guy who could throw. He's a guy that can run, and I think Kaepernick brings both of those things. If I think it's a long shot that he's on a team, especially while Cam Newton's still sitting out without one. But those are where I could see him going. If
Yeah, I think we all pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of I don't think he's going to come back and be a bona fide starter in the NFL. If anything, he's a backup. And John, I think you're right as well. He hasn't played for a long time, and there's a lot of young, talented quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to make it this season, but we'll have to see what happens. As far as the MVP race, let's just go around the horn here. John, who do you have as your MVP for the season?
I got two guys that I'm looking at. One is Mahomes, and the other one's going to be Dak Prescott. I think he's going to have a monster year. I think both of these players are, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have them as MVPs. But Dak, I think's got, especially signing a franchise tender. He's going to want that big contract, and he's got a lot of guys. He's got a lot of weapons around him, similar to Mahomes. So those are the two that I'm going to watch out for.
Yeah, for me, it's all about Patrick Mahomes as the MVP. I just think he's too good. He's going to continue to be too good, and he'll probably be the MVP. Rich, what are your thoughts at this award?
I got to go Patty Mahomes as well. John, I can see what you're saying about Dak, but it really matters if Dak gets paid or not before July 15th. If he gets paid, players that tend to get paid kind of slump a little bit. If he's playing for that contract, I think he's going to ball out either way. But Patrick Mahomes, I think he's going to have another MVP year for sure.
Yeah, I think, we're all in agreement here. Patty Mahomes is the man, the myth, the legend. And I think that's going to reflect in our next topic, the way too soon Super Bowl prediction. Not who's going to win, but who do we think is going to be there? John, what's your matchup?
Well, I kind of gave it away with my MVP picks, but it's going to be Chiefs-Cowboys for my early pick. Again, I think the Chiefs' offense is going to be unstoppable, and I kind of think the same for the Cowboys. To me, it's a matter of which of those two could play better defensively and on special teams. But those are the two that I'm looking at right now as an early favorite.
Yeah, I think that's a real strong matchup. It's on my list as well as some possible teams. And my other Super Bowl matchups both include the Ravens. I think Ravens-Saints is a possibility, and I think Ravens-Bucks is a possibility. For me, I just can't quite imagine a Super Bowl without Tom Brady in it. So I have that as one of my matchups as well. Rich, what are your Super Bowl matchups as of June 2020?
I mean, for me, it's really four teams. It's the Chiefs, it's the Ravens, it's the Saints, and it's the Bucks. And you can put any combination of those teams in the Super Bowl. But for me, I'm going third time's the charm because this is my Super Bowl matchup I picked for the previous 2 years. I'm going Chiefs versus Saints. Let's make it happen this year for Breeze.
Absolutely. Again, if you listened to the previous show, if you found your way here, Rich, as a Jets fan, is the biggest homer for the New Orleans Saints you will ever meet. He's been wanting Drew Brees to win a Super Bowl, a second Super Bowl, for as long as I can remember. He will continue to advocate on their behalf. It is time for the Saints to win another Super Bowl, if only so Rich can stop picking them to win the Super Bowl. But guys, that's going to do it for our inaugural show, the relaunch, the new show, the rebranding, whatever you want to call it, Daily to Dynasty. We want to thank all of you so much for listening. I want to thank Rich and John so much for coming on tonight, talking some football with me. We've all been missing sports in this pandemic, but, I think things will continue to get better. They are starting to get reintroduced, right? There's more and more sports becoming available to us, and it will be more and more content for us to discuss, watch, dissect, and waste our money on betting. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully we get an NFL back this fall. Again, please follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at cgorbs94. You can follow John at John Hazelet 475. That's John with an H. 475. I think I said 474 before. John Hazelet 475. And Rich at Coda522. If you watch the show on YouTube, thank you so much for doing so. Please like, subscribe, comment below. It helps the show out in the standings and lets us know what you like and don't like. If you're listening to this thing via podcast, nice 5-star rating, never hurt nobody, and we'll be sure to give you a shout out on a later show. So guys, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys again real soon. We'll see you next time on Daily Dynasty.